There we go. I was talking to myself. Thank you very much, Jenny. Jenny, I can't see a clock, so if I start to go over, could you give me a nod? Oh,
I will do.
thanks very much. Okay, welcome everybody. Nice to see you all here. Going to be talking about tip boxes today. So here on the screen, you should be able to see a couple of examples of tip boxes, just to make sure that we all know what we're talking about. And these are those little boxes that give us exam advice, exam information, language information, tips about English language, grammatical structures, etc. So you can see two here that I've taken from a couple of Cambridge books. And the first thing I'm going to ask everybody to do, please, Jenny has sent through a poll. Hopefully you can see the poll. And I would like you, please, to just read those questions, read the options, and select the one that's most relevant to you. So how do you use tip boxes with your students in class generally? If you can please do the poll. I'm just going to give everybody a couple of minutes, and then Jenny will come in with the answers.
Okay, so I can see everyone is voting in the poll right now. 67% of you voted, so we'll give you a chance to all have a look at the questions and place your votes, and then we'll share those results.
Erica cannot see the poll. Jenny, is there
it should pop up. If it's not popping up, have a look in a poll tab. If not, you can post your thoughts in the chat if you can't see the poll.
Jenny, could you just read the questions?
So the questions are, how do you use tip boxes with your students in class? Do you read them to your students? Do you ask your students to read them? Do you not do anything with them, or something else? In which case you can pop your answers in the chat. Okay, we'll just leave that for a few more seconds. So if you want to vote, pop your answers in now. Otherwise, we are going to end the poll. Okay. Right, and I'm going to share the results now. And you should be able to see those.
I can see them.
Deb, can you see those? And attendees should be able to see. But you've got a strong winner there.
I asked my students to read them, which I'm not surprised about. I read them to my students, or I ask my students to read them. What's that? 50, 60, 75, over 3/4 ask their students to read them, or read them to their students. 7% I don't do anything with them, and 14% other. Okay, that's super. Thank you very much for taking part in the poll. I'm just going to close that now and move on. Okay, so I did a similar poll on LinkedIn. I asked exactly the same question, and the results, as you can see, were pretty similar. With around 1/5 of those that answered the poll not doing anything with them, and around 1/3 asking students to read them or to read them to their students. So tip boxes then provide language skills, development strategies, highlight common errors as we know, offer advice about an exam task, and provide information. And I think really that they're little sort of gold mines. But as a learning tool, the tip box is only effective if we use it effectively to improve our learner outcomes. And what I was doing was similar to most of you, 75% of you. I was reading them to my students. I was asking my students to read them to themselves, or to a partner, or to the class. But effectively, I don't think I was using them very effectively. I think I was using them in a very passive way. So I think a lot of the learning perhaps that the tip boxes offer was lost. So just a little bit then about active learning and passive learning, which is something that I was thinking about when I was thinking about tip boxes, advice boxes, what I was doing with them and what I thought perhaps I could be doing with them. So if we think about passive learning, that's around things like transcribing, listening, writing, without actually processing what we're doing. And if we process something, then it becomes much more an active learning process. Accepting something that we're told without actually evaluating it and assessing how effective or not it is. Recalling, so a lot of students, they can repeat a correct answer, but they can't always then apply the language in a meaningful way. Some students, as we know, perhaps have a fear of not being right, so they have to be right. I was the same when I was studying. And a more active learning way is to be willing to make mistakes and to develop your learning. So the benefits of active learning then are obviously it helps with student autonomy. So it helps students to be self-motivated, self-learners, if you like. It deepens understanding. So anything that we teach the students, if we do it in an active way, their understanding will develop. It develops collaborative skills, often but not always. We ask students if we're doing some sort of active learning task. We might ask them to work in pairs or small groups. That doesn't mean that we have to. It doesn't mean that if students work individually, then it's passive, but collaboration is something that comes out of active learning. It's very student-centred. The student is at the heart of the learning process, and by its very nature, it increases student engagement and motivation. And what I wanted to do was to turn these gold mines of information into a more active learning process. I wanted to exploit them. And how? Well, I wanted to use them as springboards for class and home-based activities. I wanted to use them for pre-learning or post-learning tasks. Perhaps I could use them for fast finishers, students who finish before the rest of the class. We always have 1 or 2 students who zoom ahead. And I also wanted to use them to support weaker learners. So here, I think with the tip box, the advice box, we have these nuggets, these gold mines of information. And I think what I wanted to do was think, okay, can I use these more effectively? Can I use them as additional activities rather than say read them or read them myself to my students. Okay, so the traditional, or what I was doing traditionally, read the information in the box, I considered to be passive, a passive learning, and I wanted to exploit the tick boxes and turn them into something that's more active. So read the information in the box and then do something with the information, which will deepen the students' learning experience and develop their skills. On the screen here, we can see a reading and use of English part 3 exam advice. I've taken this from 3rd edition of the Complete First, and the reason I've done that is because I wrote the teacher's book for the 3rd edition, and it was writing this teacher's book that really made me think about how teachers, and I am also a teacher, how we as teachers use these tick boxes, these advice boxes, these information boxes more effectively. And writing the teacher's book really forced me to think that through. So in this example, we have the reading and use of English part 3. Read the information in the box and then dictate 4 adjectives. So in this example, I noticed that the reading and use of English tip box had information about negative prefixes. So I thought that, if I dictated 4 adjectives and then asked the student to add the correct negative prefix to each adjective and then discuss which best and least describes them and why. So what I was hoping to do here was use this tick box as a way to actually develop the students' skills more deeply, and also perhaps to practice speaking, maybe speaking part 2, when they're comparing 2 photographs. In this example, they were comparing perhaps themselves. There's another. So this one here is a exam advice for listening part 3. Here you can see that it comes after an exam practice of the same type. And so what I wanted to do here was read the information in the tick box and then draw the students' attention to the last bullet point, and then give them a task from the previous exercise. What we all often find with these exam advice boxes is that they're specifically giving us advice about something that is relevant in the exam practice that the student has done in a previous exercise. So in this example, the final tip box, remember that the speakers may talk about something connected with other sentences, but there is only one correct sentence for each speaker. That's because there's something in that exam practice relevant to that point. So point to option A from the last exercise and ask the students what speaker said about something connected to this sentence, even though it was not the correct answer. So they're actually practicing the technique that is in the exam advice tip. Okay, this is an exam advice tip box from First Certificate Speaking Part 2. You can see here that it makes reference to another part of the student book, unit from a different unit, in this example, Unit 2. And so here we can perhaps try this. tell students to read the information in the box and then ask them to reread the exam information in Unit 2, and in pairs ask them to discuss which approach they prefer and why before presenting their ideas to the class. So they're thinking a bit more critically. Exam advice tip box from writing part 2. Read the information in the box and then put students into small groups. Ask them to brainstorm different ways to make a plan. For example, mind maps, writing frames, headings and lists, etc., before discussing which technique they most and least prefer and why. Okay, so this tip box you can see here on the right, the exam advice is about speaking part 3. In this example, I chose not to read the tip box with the student. I did the opposite. So in this example, I did not read the information in the box. Instead, I asked students to ignore it, to cover it, to close their books. And after they had completed the speaking practice, I asked them to use the advice as a checklist. So you can see the exam advice there. It's asking, it's advising students to give reasons for their choices, to listen and respond to what their partner says, so they can actually turn the advice in the tip box into a checklist. So, did I give reasons for my choices? Did I respond to what my partner said? Or when students complete the task, you could put them into groups of 3, and 2 students could practice the speaking task, whilst the 3rd student looks at the exam advice and uses it as a checklist and then provides feedback to their classmates. Here's another example of something you could do. So this is an exam task information box here for reading and use of English part 6. This one, do not read the information in the box. Instead, ask students to close their book. So don't allow them to look at the tip box, close the books and dictate a set of true and false questions. You can usually do this quite easily if the tip box gives exam information, and then you can turn them into true false questions. So for example, reading and use of English part 6 has 7 gaps. That's false, it has 6. Reading and use of English part 6, you will read between 300 and 400 words. Yeah, so you can use it as a way to test students' knowledge, but you can also, in this way, perhaps is a little bit more motivating than simply asking the students to read the information in the box and underline the key points. In this example, here we have a reading and use of English part 5 tip box. What I often find with students, I don't know about you guys, but when I'm reading sort of exam advice to do with reading strategies, things like read, I might say skim the article before you look at the questions, or read the article quickly before you look at the questions. Often students don't always agree with that advice, which is absolutely fine as long as they can discuss it and justify why they don't agree. But often they don't agree. And so a way in which I think that you can make this active learning opportunity is to turn the speaking or reading advice boxes, tip boxes, into a writing part 1 or part 2 practice. So here you go. You can see here's my part 1. So this is an essay a practice, essay question. Which reading strategies are the best for reading and use of English part 5 success? Write about skimming, scanning your own idea. So we have here the reading strategy, but I'm trying to encourage students to think about this critically. I'm trying to encourage students to be more active, and in this way, by turning the advice into an essay question effectively, they can actually hopefully develop their ideas. You could turn it into an agree or disagree question. And that really, I noticed that Erica said that her students often disagree with the reading strategy advice, and that's absolutely fine. If you turn it into an agree or disagree question, then students have to justify and give reasons why they agree or disagree, rather than simply say, I don't agree with that. I don't do it. I don't agree with it. I'm not going to try it. So you could say something like, people say skimming a reading text before you look at the questions achieves the best results. Do you agree? Write about. And so that way they really have to justify what they're saying. I'm just going to pause for a sip of water. And another one I quite like is a speaking part 2 practice, an email from a friend, in this instance me. You have received this email from your English speaking friend Deb. I guess you know I'm studying for my first certificate exam. I know you took it last year. My teacher told us to read the text quickly first. Why does that help? Why is it important to pay attention to words like often and never? What other advice can you give me? Write and tell me about it, Deb. So that's your 150 word email question there. And again, encouraging the students to think about the advice in the box, but also they can develop their writing skills. They can think about their paragraph structure. They can think about their grammatical structures. In this example, giving advice. They can support their ideas with reasons, examples, as I said before. So those are 2 more ideas, things that you could try. Okay, and another one then is to maybe turn the tip boxes into exercises for grammar and or vocabulary practice. So I'm just going to give you a moment to have a look at the tip box. As you can see, this is a tip box for speaking part 4, all the things that you should do. And I'm not going to ask my students to read it. Instead, I'm going to do something else with it that's related to grammar and or vocabulary practice. I'm just going to give you a moment to look at that yourself and perhaps think of how you might do that. If you want to put something in chat, please do. And then I will share with you what I've come up with. Okay, so I'm just going to pause for a moment or 2. Okay, and here we go. So I'm going to turn this one. Well, it's got some lovely language, hasn't it? So I'm going to turn this one into a gap fill. I'm not going to read the information in the box at this time. We will read it later, but for now, I've spotted this tick box. I've looked at this lovely language, and I'm going to turn it into a gap fill exercise. So I've selected the key tips, I guess, the key points that come after should. And the first one, there's 2, and I'm going to write them on the board. So you should your opinions and them. You should giving short answers. That will get students thinking there about the ing. You should your ideas. You should carefully when your partner is speaking. And the idea here is that students have to come up with the verb or a verb, a suitable verb that's missing. This, I think, is really good for grammatical structures, should plus ing or infinitive. And here you've got express, or it could give or share your opinions. So you don't necessarily, students don't necessarily have to have the word that's in the tick box, but they have to have a word that fits grammatically. So you should express your opinions and support them. You should avoid giving short answers. You should expand your ideas, explain your ideas would fit in there. And you should listen carefully when your partner is speaking. So once students have done this, once they've completed the gaps, you could then ask them to refer to the tip box, the answers. You could discuss with them where more than one answer is possible. So that's helping them to develop their range, their grammatical range, their vocabulary range, and then you could ask them to discuss which of the tips they feel would be most useful to them and why. So, you know, in effect, you have then maybe a 10-minute, perhaps you could get 10 minutes class time out of a small tick box. And I think not only then will the student remember, well, I think they're much more likely to remember the tip, but then they're also more likely to apply the tip because they're actually, or apply the learning from the tip because they're actually being tasked with something to do. Okay. So, we have here you should be able to see on your screens 3 tick boxes from 3 different course books. And what I would like you to do, please, is I would like you to look at those ABC. I need your help. I'd like you to help me and all of us think about what we could do with those tick boxes in class to exploit the learning potential that they offer. So you don't necessarily have to use them for their intended purpose. You could, as we did with the reading strategies, you could use them as a writing task if you wanted, or you could use them for grammar or vocabulary practice. But I just want you to think about, please, what could you do with these tick boxes and complete the sentence for each one, and please put your ideas in chat. So we have A, B and C, 3 examples. Please think about how you could use those in class, and please do share your ideas in the chat box. I'm going to pause for maybe a few minutes. I don't know what the time is. I have no idea what the time is. So I don't think I've been speaking for that long, but I may be wrong. So if you, I'm going to pause for a few minutes while you think about how you could use these tip boxes in class. Doesn't have to be for the intended task. It could be for something else, as we've already discussed. And please put your ideas in the chat box. I'm going to pause. Okay, any thoughts? Okay, Natalia, thank you. So read the information in the box and then ask students to give their own examples. Yes, so you got hi, that's a vocabulary, isn't it? Anna, I do the speaking practice without reading the information beforehand, with some true-false statements about foods to discuss, and then read the tip box. That again is B. Any other thoughts? Okay, Daniela B. Back to the board guessing game with a few examples. Yes, that would be good actually, wouldn't it? High in sugar, high in calories. Perhaps with the sort of common collocations. Yeah, high in fats. Yeah, that would work. Okay, Olga, A. Let me go back. I missed that one. Hold on, Olga, I'm just coming to you. A, we can ask students to read a sample letter and then ask them about the greeting style and parting phrase. Yes, I like that idea. That would be good, wouldn't it? So they can then maybe compare an email or letter with the exam advice. So yeah, in fact, I guess then we could ask them to compare maybe something they've written before with the exam advice. So they can compare their own writing with the exam advice. Ask students about their study techniques. Yeah, you could do that with C, couldn't you, Silvina, I guess? Okay, with 1, let students consult you on the subject. With 3 or C, give them verbs and make them provide the statements of advice. Yes, so I like that with C. You can just give them, actually I'd not thought of that one, that's quite nice, isn't it? So you could just give them the verbs, then they have to come up with the advice. So you could say read, listen maybe, highlight, draw. Absolutely, that would be good. Anna, I think it's possible to include process writing tasks and then pay attention to style, contractions, etc., and maybe compare. Yes, I agree. When I looked at A, I thought because it mentions contractions and informal style, I thought, and then it includes contractions, so it's good to hear from you. I'm glad you're thinking of coming. I thought you could get students to identify those contractions, because students don't always know what these words mean, do they? If I say contraction to a student, they might not know what it means. So maybe get the students to identify the contraction. Then maybe they could, because these are informal phrases, it's good to hear from you. They could maybe change the phrases so they're more formal. So they're comparing then formal with informal. So it's good to hear from you becomes thank you for your letter or your email dated the 5th of May. So that would be a bit of a comparison, moving on from the comparison that Anna suggested. Compare the structure of a letter, with one of theirs. B, in addition to hi, in something we can use the opposite. Absolutely, Olga, brilliant idea. I love that idea. Absolutely. So the opposite, elicit the opposite of hi from the student, and then get them to create maybe sentences, perhaps try and personalize those. Okay, so Daniela, A, without reading it, secret tasks, different students each would write a sentence in a folded sheet of paper, unable to read what's already there. The different tasks would suggest more or less formal language, and we would discuss the final text with mixed results. Students would have to figure out what was odd about the usage and in the same email message. Yeah, that's good, isn't it? Because that's really getting them to analyse formal versus informal language. Absolutely. And it might be that the students write secretly, some students write formal and some write informal, and then as a class they have to work out which is what's wrong with the overall email. Yeah, I love that one. C, underline the words they don't know, and then they might be able to highlight the keywords or main ideas. Yeah, I mean, I also think about maybe asking the students to explain what a keyword actually is, because I'm not sure they always know. Sometimes they sort of randomly underline everything, don't they? I'd give these sentences with some wrong words. This is Yelena for C. To spot and correct. Oh, that's a good idea, isn't it? So you could deliberately make the strategy the opposite and ask students to correct it. Or, because we've talked before about students not always agreeing to strategies, you could divide the class in half, couldn't you? Half the class could follow the strategy and the other half could do the opposite, and then they could evaluate their success or otherwise. Okay, so wonderful. Thank you so much there for your suggestions. That was wonderful. There's a lot of really good suggestions in there. So I just wanted to just to finish then with just a rather short or long list of ideas. Now, I am writing a follow-up blog, so a lot of this will be included. So please don't worry if you miss some of these ideas. There will be a blog and you can refer to the blog. And also, I understand the webinars have been recorded, so you can listen again. But I'm just going to leave you then with these ideas. I'll run through a few of them. So analysing exam techniques, we've talked about that. So and maybe writing about them. You can get students to review all the advice, because often in a student book there's lots of advice about one task. So you can get students to review all of it and then select the bits that are most relevant for them. They could create a master tip box about exam advice or grammatical items, etc. They could display it in class, add to it as the course continues. The true-false questions we've talked about. They can compare exam advice with marking criteria, you know, and think about what additional advice perhaps is missing. Or they could think about why the advice is there in the first place. How does it connect to the marking criteria for whatever exam your students are taking? Post-practice checklists. Evaluate their own performance, decide what advice might be, advice might address their specific weaknesses. So they're internalizing the advice and reflecting on the advice themselves and others. So turning them into different types of exercises, grammar exercises, vocabulary exercises, turning reading advice into writing, writing advice into speaking, etc. Turn them into short quizzes, etc. I could go on really. So I've just about finished everything I wanted to say. So I can either move to my final slide there, any questions, or if you want me to go back to the slide with the list, I can. But Jenny, I've finished now, so over to you if there's any other questions you'd like me to answer.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for such an interesting session, Deb, and so packed with tips, even with that additional last slide. So, you know, for people who didn't perhaps catch everything on that last slide, Deb will be posting these on the blog, which we'll email to you along with the recording. So you will be able to catch up on those if you would like to see them again. This is a reminder, we will send you your attendance certificate by email in the next few days. If you do have any questions that you'd like to ask Deb, you can start putting those in the Q&A box now, and we'll answer as many as we can in a moment. So while we're on the theme of tip boxes, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about some of our materials, both old and new, which include plenty of tips to support both you and your students. So Deb, if you wouldn't mind moving on to the next slide, that would be wonderful. And then the next one. Okay, so just quickly, what we've got here is our exam boosters and trainers, which are available for many of the Cambridge exams, and they're all full of hints and tips as well as exam task training. You know, a really good resource for those who just want to get ready for exams and get lots of pointers and guidance. Next slide. If you wouldn't mind, Deb, thank you. So Open World is a new series from Cambridge. It's the course that takes you further. As you can see there, it's great for combining general English and thorough exam preparation, and it's suitable for school-age students and older. The course is full of tips as part of the integrated exam journey. The new level for this year is Open World C1 Advanced, which you can see there. And if you wouldn't mind the next slide, Deb. This is the compact series, which offers fast, focused exam preparation for students who are already at the level of the exam. Each book offers a compact 50 to 60 hours of revision and practice. Compact First is a new title, 3rd edition, and it's available from this month. And the next slide, please. Thank you, Deb. And the complete series is just that, complete exam preparation that covers everything. Our new title this month is Complete First Third Edition. But as you can see, and even beyond the ones on this slide, we have a level of complete for most of the Cambridge exams. And finally, the next slide, Deb. Okay, the Cambridge One digital pack comes with all of our new courses this year. Gives you all of your teaching and learning resources in one place. Practice Extra provides additional grammar and vocabulary practice, and Test and Train offers both exam practice and a timed test. The Test and Train also includes plenty of exam tips and guidance, which you can pop up as you work through the tasks. Okay, and the final slide, which is just a reminder that you're watching this as part of the Exams Catch-Up series. If you've enjoyed this webinar, do check back and catch up on any that you've missed or share them with your colleagues. You can find the recording of Deb's webinar on flipped classroom flexibility, as the others in the series. They're also there on the Watch Now page. So we'll pop that. There you go. The URL has just appeared in the chat for you now. Okay, so that was all of our information about exams. We're going to have a look now at any questions that you'd like us or Deb to answer. So do keep those coming. We've got time to answer a few of these. Pop your questions in the question and answer tab. But we've got one here from a lady called Gizem. And she's actually got two questions. I'm going to, but what is the best way of encouraging students to listen to the teacher? There you go, Deb. So not specifically about tip boxes, but I think that's more of a general classroom management tip.
It is, isn't it? I guess for me, it's about the students knowing or understanding that I've got something to say that will help them or will support them. So I guess it's drawing those links between what I can do for them and why they should listen to me, really. Because that's a difficult one, isn't it? I mean, I guess it would depend on the specific student or students, but it's giving them a reason to listen, isn't it, really? And so that they understand that you've got something that they need, advice or support or whatever it is, and being really clear about that.
Yeah, and I'd imagine, keeping things as interactive as possible, as you're suggesting with the tip box exercises, breaking it up so that it's not just the teacher talking at the front of the class, but yeah, making things interactive.
Maybe asking the students what they, if you're noticing that none of your students are listening to you, then why not? And thinking about, why are they not listening? Is it because they don't understand? Is it because they need more interaction? Is it because the materials, that they're not finding the materials motivating? So it's really getting behind that, I think, and working out what they need from you.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, any more questions for Deb? Do put them in the Q&A box. Deb, in the meantime, we have another question here from Gizem saying, an English language teacher teaching fourth graders aims to improve the students' face-to-face communication skills, but realizes that his students have problems comprehending the person they're talking to. So they struggle to then continue that pair work activity.
Okay, so I guess initially I would want to teach them, I would want to make sure that they were able to use phrases that explain that they didn't understand, because it's about communication breakdown, isn't it? And if we don't understand somebody, if I didn't understand something that Jenny said, I know that I would say, I don't understand, can you repeat? So I think it's about teaching them phrases that they can use that communicates that they don't understand, and then maybe and then tells the person they're speaking to what they need. So I don't understand, can you use simpler words, for example? the ways to help them to negotiate with somebody when they don't understand what they're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we don't appear to have any other questions. So if you do have a question for Deb, you'd better type it in quickly. Otherwise, we will assume that you have just understood everything and are reeling at all of these lovely tips that have been passed your way,
And
which I think is great.
Yes, thank you for your wonderful feedback.
Yes, had lots of positive interaction and feedback as we go through. So thank you for being such great participants. It's been lovely to have you on the webinar today. And yes, do check back for the blog later to get a summary of everything that was in this. Do pass anything on to your colleagues. We've got this whole exam catch-up series now available on the website, which is great for anybody who's coming back to exams after the last year that we've all had. And the disruption of it. So, you know, as and when it's appropriate for you to think about, you know, Cambridge 1 Advanced or Cambridge 1 First, or getting back into any of these different topics that you can see on the screen. Yeah, do come and dip back in. Thank you all for coming today. Enjoy the rest of your days. Thank you again to Deb for being a great presenter and so many lovely ideas. And we hope to see you all again soon.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.